We're off to the Country Doctor Museum today to see how medicine was practiced in the 1800s and the early 1900s. But first I'd like to introduce my Alaskan adventure friend, Karen.
Hey, good morning.
Karen, who will be with us on today's trip. We've got about an hour drive down to the Doctor Museum in Bailey, North Carolina. And we'll have a tour guide, so we'll find out everything we can about medicine back then. It was founded in 1967. It's the oldest country doctor museum in the country. So we're going to get on the road and get on down there, right, Karen?
Let's do it.
All right, let's do it. We'll see you there. We're on Highway 264 out of Greenville, North Carolina for the short drive up to Bailey. It's a beautiful day for an adventure, the little white puffy clouds floating around the light traffic. 264 will soon become an interstate, giving Greenville its first interstate highway. It's just a short drive through the small town of Bailey to the museum. On today's Country Doctor adventure, we're going to take you back to the and early 1900s when doctors still made house calls. And we're going to show you how they did it then when a visit with a doctor was only $1. Karen and I went in to get our ticket and was told that they had already started a tour. So she wanted us to make an appointment, so we're coming back at 2 o'clock to do the tour, and she's going to be our guide. So we're going to go ahead and have lunch. We'll be back at 2 to start the tour. Okay, it's lunchtime at the Cracker Barrel. We're going to eat this, and we'll be right back. Go on over to the Country Doctor Museum and get the tour started. We're going to begin our tour of the Country Doctor Museum here at the doctor's offices, where a guide will take us through and explain how medicine was practiced in the 1800s and early 1900s.
Concierge.
Oh, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, let's go in and take a look.
Beautiful.
So this first room was Dr. Freeman's office, Howard Franklin Freeman, and it was in Wilson County, attached to a plantation home. And we have it set up as an apothecary or an old-time drugstore. Dr. Freeman died in 1915, so that gives you an idea of when this was in use as a doctor's office. And the cabinets came from the Bartlett pharmacy that was here in Bailey. They date back to the late 1800s when they were made. You don't see this kind of woodworking and cabinetry these days in the Walgreens or the CVS. And when you see the bottles and jars, it's all the original contents. If they have something in them, we try not to mess with things too much as they come into the museum. And this is 50 plus years of collecting medical artifacts. So it's not just a few doctors' collections that we've preserved. We continue to get things donated. We just have to limit how much we can take in now with storage. The things with the colored water in them are called show globes. So we have 2 in the cabinet. There's the green one to the left of the cabinet, and then the red one over in the corner.
Gorgeous.
And those.
Wow. I never knew that.
If a doctor or pharmacist didn't have the machine, he'd have to hand roll and cut and hand roll his pill dough. So you have the tile standing up behind there and you see the little hash marks. So they would cut each little pill and hand roll. I can show you over here. And we use Play-Doh to demonstrate. So this dough would be made out of crushed up. They'd take the mortar and pestle, crush up so they were into a powder, and hold it all together with a little oil or honey or yeast. So it's in a dough form. And then they would roll it out. And then these pills here are some old coating on them. So they'd coat them with sugar, syrup, make
Yeah,
them
look, my
taste.
grandma used to take something called
Morning with the colors and the textures. Some have ridges,
oh.
and or they would mold the.
Tell me something about all these bottles over here of medicines. Would the doctor typically have a lot of these or just a few of them?
Right. He would not have a big apothecary like this. This would be more what a drugstore would have.
Mm-hmm.
To the right, we have a smaller little apothecary cabinet underneath the show globe there. So a doctor might have a smaller piece of furniture like that one, or he would have like a triptych, which is down below in that case over there behind you.
Oh, okay.
Just have a few bottles, right? And a lot of times country doctors would have to get their things from mail order, have things shipped in. You know, if they were in rural areas, they wouldn't have access.
So they treated patients both with the homemade pills that they made and these solutions, the different, I guess some
Right, well, some of these they'd have to compound, right? A lot of these are just the ingredients. Some are flavorings, like we have wild cherry and vanilla, so it would be a way to flavor whatever they're
So
making.
they were druggists and doctors.
Exactly.
That's cool.
Yes.
All right. Okay. These are leeches that they use to heal patients, and you can see they're alive. They're swimming around in there. What were they primarily used for?
So leeches were for bloodletting, and they do still use them in medicine today. These are medicinal leeches. I've had different doctors on my tour, like plastic surgeons, if they need to drain an area of blood, like a pocket of blood, or because leeches have an
medical.
So some of the medicines and the techniques that they used in the 1800s are still in use today.
Yes.
Amazing. Must be pretty good.
A lot of people remember Paragorg. It was sold over the counter for a long time. And a lot of the liquids were mostly alcohol, so there was no labeling.
I thought that sign down there that says,
Cure you or
cure you or kill you. I don't know if I want to take any of that stuff or not.
But if you lived in a town that had an apothecary, you didn't have to go to the doctor. You could go into the apothecary, and they were usually trained just.
Interesting name.
So these next two rooms were Dr. Brantley's office, and his picture is up on the top of this cabinet, and he's on the poster on the back wall. And that poster is of his medical school class in Baltimore in the late 1800s. And we also have his original diploma on the wall. Most of our original things, because we're now part of ECU and the Health Science Library, we have an archive there. And you attended lectures, you purchased tickets. We have some of Dr. Avera's on his exam table, and some of Dr. Butler's in the surgery case. 2 years of attending lectures, you showed your tickets and you got your degree.
Wow.
Oh, only 2 years?
2
That's
years.
all.
2 years.
Oh, wow.
If you didn't have
nurse.
if you didn't have the money for the tickets, you could apprentice with a doctor. If you could get a doctor to take you on, and that was usually just 1 year of traveling with the doctor, and then you would
Well, you could get on-the-job training.
That's it.
How about
That's it.
that?
That would be.
And
There's 2 years of school, then they bought a ticket to go to a lecture?
that was a guess as to how much from the dropper bottle to put on the mask, and hope you had the right amount.
On some of the Western shows, whenever we go to a dentist, they would give them whiskey
Oh yeah.
before they would do a procedure on their teeth.
Right.
And I guess they could still feel the pain, they just didn't care.
That's right. Picture here of his younger days, and he was the father of Dr. Gloria Graham, who was another one of the founders of the museum, and he practiced for 77 years at Pilot Mountain, North Carolina.
Wow.
And the ledger book.
I want to ask you about that now. I heard that it was common practice because they were rural doctors, mostly treated farmers and stuff.
Right.
And so they would get paid when the crops came in. They would come in and settle up their bills.
Right. We have a promissory note here that was Dr. Persons. He was in Selma. And so that family and both the husband and wife signed that they'd pay back the $113, right, going in before the Depression. And he charged 6% interest. And then on the back, the Depression, there was no
I'm
more
going to ask you,
money
how much
coming.
was the typical doctor visit back then? And
$1.
$1?
Yeah.
No insurance either,
No,
right?
no insurance, right?
Oh, wow.
Family brought us a box of things, and the doctor had been a gastroenterologist, and so he apparently kept little soup.
Now, what are these gallstones on the left?
Yes.
And what's that on the
And a
right?
bezoar is where, particularly where people chew on their hair or eat their hair.
It is. Oh my gosh, is this?
I would like to ask you, did they have IVs in the 1800s?
No,
They did. They had no IVs.
no,
So they couldn't dispense medicine that way.
no. Liquids, pills, put it in a shot. As if it's early 1900s, caring for people at home, and again, thinking rural areas where people didn't have access to doctors or hospitals, and before vaccines, before antibiotics, they had to do the best they could with home remedies, over-the-counter remedies. On the wall cases, we talk about all those common illnesses that are not so much vaccines.
So
to
this is a
prevent them.
typical sick room, what one would look like. And were these in people's homes or doctor's
Right,
offices?
in people's homes, if they had the space. Like if you didn't have the space to isolate somebody, you would have to just, curtain off a corner of the room if it was a small home. To me, this is more of a more well-to-do home would have a separate room to have a sick room. And of course, most women didn't survive childbirth. Babies didn't survive into adulthood. Examples here of them.
So you could drink this if you could get it down.
Well, isn't it for kids, you were saying?
So in a lot of cases, babies were delivered by midwives or just natural.
Right,
If there
right.
wasn't nobody
the doctor,
available
right, if
sometimes.
you didn't have a doctor or somebody that could come.
I didn't realize it had so much available. In the 1800s, there was so much available that the doctor could use for treatments. So many different things.
1800s up through about 1950.
They are. Okay. So the 1800s, and I heard that the Civil War advanced medicine a lot, especially surgery.
Right, surgery was right. They could do amputations very quickly. They were very adept at that. But then you had, on the other hand, they might survive the amputation, but they had no antibiotics, so they couldn't combat infection. They didn't have a way to control the diseases in the camp, dysentery and typhoid. And so
When was antibiotics first used?
right after World War II. They
World War
started
II.
in World War II, and then they became more widely available after that.
So,
World War II.
as bad as wars are, they did advance medicine
Yes.
because they had to.
Yeah, we have 42 penicillin treatments, and then we have some of the other. And so then you see all those vaccines that were developed even after World War II. Women's things there.
Yeah.
Women,
Well, did the doctors have nurses in the 1800s? Were there nurses available to help them?
a lot of times it was the family that helped the doctor. You may be fortunate to have a wife as a nurse, but not always.
Not normally.
Not normally.
Okay.
Was dedicated in 1971, so it's over 50 years old. And it's patterned after an Italian medicinal herb garden with the circular pattern. Thank you. Are you
Now these are some of the common herbs that were used to treat disease.
right? We have about 60 medicinal herbs, and the labels say historically what they would have been used for.
I don't remember ever hearing of that one.
Tansy, that would be for intestinal worms.
Oh wow.
We have some mints, peppermint and spearmint, which is good for calming an upset stomach. We have other things you think of more for cooking: sage, thyme, rosin.
The doctors grew their own.
Not normally. They would know somebody that grow the
They had them.
herbs.
Okay.
Leaf one.
Oh, this is eucalyptus, which is still in use today, and Vicks Vapor Rub.
So if you rub your finger.
So the flowers aren't part of the
No,
letter.
that's like an active.
And this would bring a fever down. Amazing. And that was before they had aspirin or after? Oh, yes. It does smell like that. Okay, this is rosemary, which is common found. I've seen it in the woods before.
Right, and a lot of people use rosemary for cooking. It's good if you have a headache. Just taking a fresh sprig of rosemary and smelling it can take a headache away.
All right.
Help to take it away. Valerian in it.
The purple one, that's lavender.
Over by the fence. That have the little purple flowers over here.
Oh, okay. Okay, we're looking at lavender.
You guys use this stuff to make
We do an activity.
Did you already say what this one was?
That's a butterfly weed. So these little bugs eat the seed pods, which I think helps to open them up. And these that the land across the street was donated to the museum. So if you would have come.
Okay, we're going to go in and take a look at the Carriage House. That's where the different modes of transportation they used back in the 1800s and early 1900s are. Let's go in and have a look and see what they had.
And all of these things came out of North Carolina, used in North Carolina. Dr. Henderson Irwin's buggy, and we have the Surrey, and then the 2 Model Ts.
So this just starts over here with the early transportation and then goes on up.
Right.
When did the T models come in?
Those are in the early 20s. So
Early
the 1912 and then the 1926
Okay. Does this give the year that each one was used on it?
on the signs, yeah.
Okay, let's go over here and take a look at the buggy. Okay, from 1914. My goodness. These were used also in 1919. Each one has a little card on it that describes what it is and what year it was used. Even got the doctor's gloves laying on the seat. And it's got a fringe on top, of course. Now, let's take a look at this baby. This is a 1912 Ford Model T. Dr. H.B. Shields' vehicle. Isn't that cool? All right, this is a 1926 Ford Model T, Dr. W. T. Griggs. This is his vehicle. It's from the early 1930s that it was used.
Transportation. We also have a picture of Dr. Shields with his horse and buggy. So he had both the horse and buggy and the 1912 Model T.
I feel like
Okay.
somebody was just visiting me, like something was on my head. That's wild. Do you know what's this one right here? It looks like Stampers, but I know that's not what it is.
Oh, those are the ones.
So when someone was sick and they needed a doctor, they had to go into town and get the doctor and bring him out there, right?
Right. If they didn't have a telephone, right, before the telephone. So you think about how long it would take if you were on a farm and there was an accident, how long it would take to find where the doctor is. He could be anywhere. He could be delivering a baby 10 miles away. You had to figure out where he was if you didn't have a telephone.
Oh my
So
goodness.
once everyone had telephones, even if it was a party line, which a lot of people remember,
Yes.
it was much faster way to get the doctor to
I
come.
see. So Sometimes when there's an accident on a farm, the time frame was very important. So you may get there too late.
Right.
Oh, that's bad. But anyways, good to have phones. These are the doctor's bags that they normally would carry.
Right. Kind of the classic black bag.
Okay, this is what do they call this? A steel lung?
Iron lung.
Iron lung for
lung.
polio.
Right, which was the early respirator to help people breathe. They couldn't breathe on their own during the polio epidemics.
So what years was this used?
This was invented in 1929 and up into the early 1960s, and then ventilators were invented, so you didn't have to use the iron lung.
That is a weird looking contraption.
And it just worked on pressure, positive and negative pressure. So the patient would suck a breath in, the pressure would reverse, and it would push the air out.
Well, that wouldn't be too good if you had claustrophobia.
Well, your head would be outside, so you wouldn't totally be
still
enclosed.
Yeah, okay.
It would be, he worked on the cattle farm and the chute that the cattle went.
Okay, this is how the doctors would have looked in the 1800s, pulling up to a farmhouse to treat patients. That concludes our tour of the Country Doctors Museum. I hope you enjoyed it. Many thanks to Karen for joining us today. And we'll see you guys on the next adventure.